A very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers. We are so grateful that you have chosen to be with us this afternoon. Today is a very special afternoon. It is called Creation Sabbath in Seventh Adventist circles this afternoon. Today is a very special afternoon. We have a very special program lined up for you. So we want to welcome you to Let's Talk and pray by the grace of God that as we share today, that your hearts will be blessed. I have two very special guests, but before I introduce the guests, I would like to invite you to have a word of prayer with us. Eternal Father and our God, be with us, grant us your peace and your blessings as we go on to this very important Let's Talk edition today, being Creation Sabbath. We ask for your wisdom and your guidance in Jesus' name, amen. Well, friends, this afternoon, as indicated, it's Creation Sabbath. We are going to be talking to two very special guests with us today. This pin that I am wearing here, or you may see it just on my shirt collar, it really is a creation pin. It is supposed to be, if I can take it off, and just so that you can get a view of it, just that you will be able to see it. That's the creation pin. It's a C for creation. And it really is about celebrating the fact that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And so we are grateful that you have chosen to join us. This afternoon, we're going to be having a discussion on science and creation. In fact, we're calling it Science's Testimony of Divine Design in Creation, or you may say intelligent design in creation. In academic circles, we like to say intelligent design in creation. And we have two very special guests with us this afternoon. I am delighted to welcome them. I'm going to introduce them to you one by one. I want to begin by introducing to you Dr. George S. Daniel. Delighted that Dr. Daniel has consented to be with us. Let me just put him in the spotlight so you can see his face. And let me tell you a little bit about him, just a snapshot. Dr. Daniel has a BSc, Bachelor's of Science degree, first class honors from the University of the West Indies, Caveville campus. He went on to do his MSc and then PhD. His PhD was in physiology and biophysics from Dalhousie University. He has lectured in the area of quantitative methods, computing, and science in various universities, St. Mary's University. He served at a while here in Antigua, the Antigua State College, at Cave Hill, the University of the West Indies, and also at USC, the University of the Southern Caribbean. He has lectured in physiology, in biostatistics. We are delighted to have Dr. Daniel with us. Welcome to Let's Talk, Dr. Daniel.
Well, a pleasant good afternoon to you, Pastor Greene, and to all our viewing and listening audience as we discuss this very important topic, that of the Sabbath, and within the context of the alternative views with respect to our origins, evolution versus creation. And we hope we can provide some insights to all of our audience this afternoon. I look forward to it.
Most certainly. Our next guest with us today is Dr. Kenneth Greenaway. We are delighted to have him with us. Let me tell you a bit about him before I ask him to speak. Dr. Greenaway went to his primary education in Montserrat. He did paralegal work there. Likewise, he started science in his late teens and eventually studied medicine at Glasgow Medical School in Scotland. He did postgraduate studies in brain biology, brain studies at Burnell University. he has a special liking. I have spoken to him several times, and I know he has done some pioneer work on the pineal gland while working as a physician in Trinidad and in Antigua. And since 2020, he has published 2 books and 4 papers related to the science of chronobiology. He's going to tell us about those in a while. And I'm sure that our viewers will be excited to hear that he has done some amazing research in the area of I want to say what we are talking about this afternoon, the testimony of science to intelligent design and creation. Good evening, Dr. Greene. Welcome to Let's Talk.
Good afternoon, Pastor Greene, and pleasant good afternoon to all the viewers and listeners. I'm happy, Pastor Greene, that you gave me an opportunity to speak on this very important topic about creation and creation versus evolution. And up front, I'd like to state my position on this. My position is that God created us, God created the world, and I always like to put him first. So by putting him first, I want to quote Psalm 119, 130, verse 130 of Psalm 119, which is pertinent to what we are going to be discussing. The entrance of thy word giveth light. It giveth understanding unto the simple. We have to pause and analyze these words to get the very depth of meaning. I suppose as we go on, we'll understand. I think the word simple, some people wince at the word simple, but I think the Lord means that we should be humble and teachable. I think that's what it is. It's a teachable, a childlike spirit. So we approach this whole discussion about creation in a humble spirit because God created us and we have to depend on him.
Most definitely. Thank you so much, Dr. Greenaway, for sharing. Now, as indicated, we are talking about science's testimony of intelligent design and creation. Most secular scientists today reject the notion of intelligent design. They instead purport the idea of a big bang and the evolutionary development of life forms. From a scientific perspective, Dr. Daniel, I want to start with you. From a scientific perspective, what are the possibilities that a gigantic explosion of non-living matter would result in the formation of life?
That is a major stretch in thinking. When we look at the various scientific components, I think the issue stems from cosmology to geology to biology. And within these disciplines, there is tremendous debate over the foundations, for example, of the Big Bang itself. For the Big Bang to occur, it means that we have to reject the scientific laws that we know exist today. Because obviously the laws of thermodynamics could not have applied for the Big Bang to occur. So the assumptions that are made by scientists is that the laws of science did not apply at the time of the Big Bang. So this raises issues for a lot of people. So the origins of the philosophy lets you pause to think that somehow we are making a stretch to allow these phenomena to occur.
You know, I'm listening to you.
Big Bang itself does not explain all of our observations, and Patrick can go into that a little later.
Dr. Daniel, if I may interrupt a minute, I'm listening to you, and it occurs to me that perhaps I should have started somewhere else. I just want to take a step backwards because I did say, of course, that a lot of secular scientists reject the notion of intelligent design, but instead purport the idea of this Big Bang. May I ask you, just to, for the benefit of the person who is listening, who may not understand what we're talking, what in the world are we talking about with a Big Bang? Because for many people out there, when they hear about creation, they think about creation versus evolution. They begin their journey from, okay, we are a product of monkeys, but we're talking about a Big Bang. So could you, in a nutshell, just say what this Big Bang theory is?
I'm going to go even a little further back.
Okay.
To point out that the origins of modern science could have occurred out of our Judeo-Christian background. A background that says that we have a God of order and that we can discover that order by studying the world that he has created. So when we go back to Newton and the earlier scientists, they were Christians who exposed the Christian God in their writings. And their search and study in nature was trying to discover the God of nature, who was a God of order. You can say a God of science, and they were discovering their God. But times have changed. And so we have replaced our origins and says that our origins must occur, and any explanation of our origins must not include any supernatural being. That's one of the foundations of modern science, that they reject any concept of any external forces. And so we have become naturalistic in our thinking. And one of the ways to explain our origins is that the world began with this major explosion that created matter from something less than smaller than the tip of a needle. All the energy, all the matter in the universe was concentrated in something smaller than the tip of a needle.
Oh.
And at some point in time, this thing exploded to give rise to all of our planets, galaxies, and all of the universe. And somehow matter began to coalesce to give us our planets, our galaxies. And within this planet, it gave us life. So in an effort to reject God and to come up with an alternative explanation, we have the Big Bang.
Very interesting indeed. And you made the point that the Big Bang idea itself presupposes that we are putting aside the laws of
the laws of that we know exist, the laws of thermodynamics.
Interesting.
Because if those laws were to apply, the Big Bang would never occur.
Okay. Now, Dr. Greene, you studied medicine. And I suppose I also know that you have taken a special liking for brain dynamics. When you hear of the Big Bang and life developing from simple, because you're talking about microscopic organisms to start with, that of course doesn't answer how did the life begin itself, because if you have non-living matter, how do you get matter? How do you get from non-living matter the right combination to create life? But from a medical perspective, with life forms developing from very simple to complex, how does that sit with you as a physician?
Well, firstly, I'd like to concur with what Dr. Daniel said, and to add that to answer your question specifically, a group of scientists from the Geoscience Research Institute in the United States, and along with some scientists from the chemistry department at Andrews University, they studied this very issue. They produced a series of videos which discredited any idea of chemicals or any non-living matter resulting in the formation of life. They could not have life from single chemicals like nitrogen, putting these things together by a big bang. They had to involve another entity, and we call that entity God. Is a divine control.
Okay, now I suppose that, to be fair, they call it a theory. If it were proven, it would not be a theory. But so we're dealing here with a theory of origins. One says that there is a creator God, that there is special design in creation. And there's another one that says there was this explosion that eventually produced life, and things developed from very, very simple compounds to the complexity of life that we now have. And for those of us from the Christian background, we believe, of course, in the creator God. This afternoon, we want to look at what science has to tell us about intelligent design to demonstrate that, yes, there is a deliberate design in creation. Now, we don't have much time, but we're going to see how far we can go. Now, objectivity would force us to admit that the theory of evolution is much more involved than the issue of man coming from monkeys. What are some of the strong arguments that scientists use in support of evolution? I want to start this way. I know that you both don't believe in evolution, but both of you are scientists in your own rights. What are some of the arguments that people put forth to demonstrate or to support the theory of evolution?
Let me start.
Yes.
The major fact is that we're here.
Okay.
And the fact that we're here, we must have gotten here through some means. Obviously, some of the theories that were there in the past. Let's go back on the whole concept of origins. Now, people used to believe that there was something called spontaneous generation, that life automatically came from non-life. If you put out some milk or some meat, you'll find maggots arising from the meat. If you had some fruit skin, some orange peel, or rotten fruit, you'll see fruit flies arising from that. So in the past, centuries ago, a couple of centuries ago, scientists were debating the issue as to whether or not life originates from non-life. And for many of them, the issues that I just pointed out meant that based on your observation, life was coming from non-life, until it was the French scientist Louis Pasteur supposedly settled that issue, that the maggots arose because there were flies in the milk or flies on the meat that laid their eggs, and it was those laid eggs that developed into life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was thought up to be in settled science that life came from life. Life did not arise from non-life. But times change, and then other scientists, once you have a paradigm, a framework of interpretation that says no supernatural powers, then you effectively eliminate the concept of any God in our origins. And so other theories begin to make their way to the forefront in the scientific community, major one of which was Darwin's theory of our origins. And that theory survived for 100 years, almost, to be replaced by some modern theories. Because Darwin's theory does not indeed provide answers to all of our observations. there are many observations that Darwin's theory will not satisfactorily explain. So there are modern theories to try to explain the things that we have observed. So science moves from observation to a hypothesis to further observation or experimentation to try to verify the hypothesis. And after that, if it moves from hypothesis, it may become a theory, which means more observation and experimentation to try to establish that theory. And if it's fully established, it comes to a law or principle. And even those laws and principles are sometimes changed, because we had a law that says matter cannot be created or destroyed. But in a nuclear age, it had to be revised to say that matter energy cannot be created or destroyed. So science goes through this revision. So as I said, we move from life originating from non-life to life originating from life and life only, back to life can originate from non-life. And so things change. As you said, the theories will change. But that's a trend in science.
Yes.
It's not absolute. It's not truth. Science does not seek to develop truth. It seeks to develop a framework in which our observations can be explained. And the modern theory says we must explain it without any supernatural element.
That's a very interesting perspective. Dr. Greene, you were going to...
Yes,
there with
currently there are two schools of thought about our origins. One is that we were created, the origin some 6,000 years ago, according to the Bible, the creationists. There's another school of thought saying that we evolved from amoeba and so on 5 to 8 billion years ago. Now the question is, who is right? There's a way of determining which group of people, which group is correct. You can believe the Bible, but you can also believe the science, what you call chronobiology. Chrono is time, biology of time, biology concerned with time, right? The chronobiologists have found out recently that there are 3 instances, such as newborn babies, new birth, new experience, new surgery, new surgical tissue, and also spa therapy. These 3 instances show that there are new physiology, new tissue forming. They have found out in chronobiology in University of Minnesota that these 3 instances of new physiology, new birth, new life led to 7-day rhythms, SDRs. Let's call them SDRs, led to SDRs. Those SDRs are ubiquitous. They are in every living thing on Earth. They're in animals, plants, in us, in insects, everything. And even within the organisms, there is the 7-day rhythm. They used to call it circaseptan rhythm, circa around septum, around 7 circaseptan rhythms within the organism. Your all the systems, your digestive system, your cardiovascular system, all of the systems work to this rhythm of 7s. Now, if you work to the rhythm of 7s, within there's a connection. It's like a connection within each body of animals, plants, and so on. There's a connection of 7-day rhythms within each entity, and within those entities, from your dog to yourself, your relationship to your dog, to your pet, cat, to other your horse, and so on. There's also a connectivity of 7-day rhythms. So we know that the whole creation now is based on a rhythm of sevens, and this is in tandem, in unison with what the Bible is saying, that there's a 7ness in throughout creation. Now that 7ness is representative of God's presence. His number is called the Sabbatic number, is 7. And the Sabbatic number in the Bible, Revelations and so on, you have the 7ness. And in nature, you have the 7-day rhythms. And this, as I said, is ubiquitous. So there's a connection between the Bible evidence and the scientific chronobiology evidence, especially chronobiology, which is a new science that has been developed, which measures time, biology, the living systems, and as it relates to time. Okay, and that's how they know the rhythms are important. Now we can go on later to discuss who developed those 7-day rhythms, when they were developed, and why they were developed. It's very important.
Now you kind of ran ahead of me a little bit there, Dr. Greenaway. I wanted to come to that in a while, but you have posited it. So before we talk about that, though, I want to just pick up on something that Dr. Daniel mentioned there that I think is so very important. And we're going to come to the 7-day rhythms and the testimonies of things that happen. But Dr. Daniel, you mentioned that science is not so much about discovery of truth, but it is about the matter of being able to explain what is observable to me. But I'm wondering, there are lots of things that operate beyond observation, not so? In fact, I'm amazed sometimes when every now and then we, through the work of some archaeologists, we hear in the news, oh, this was discovered and that has caused scientists to rethink their assumptions about the age of the first man and these kinds of things. So we do need to look beyond the observable level because a lot of things happen beyond that. Am I correct?
For science, it must be, you can have a theory to explain something, but to be truly scientific, that theory has to be testable. You must be able to carry out, to prove it. You must be able to test it. And in that test, the test could either be true or false. It must be testable to be scientific. So yes, there are many theories that are there to explain what is observed now, and most of those theories will also be able to make projections as to what to look for in your new experiments. Because we often hear of experiments that are now discovering some particle that perhaps was not observed, but the theory says that it should exist.
Mm-hmm.
So there are theories that will make projections as to what other things we should look for.
Amazing.
And then you can test the theory by trying to look for it. If you can find the experimental regime to do that. And so in terms of the, let's go right ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that this is where Dr. Greenaway's original starting point makes it very interesting, because if science is based on what you have posited there just now, that things must be proved. When we read the Bible, it says, without faith, it is impossible to believe God, because the Bible did not go about setting out we really, in fact, the Bible itself says, can a man by searching find out God? Yeah, yes, Dr. Greenery.
Yes, I'd like to speak on that point precisely because I don't want to disagree with my colleague, but I want to add to it a bit. To say it's not everything in science, and everything in life that we can test by empirical, by scientific methodology. There are things in life, true to life circumstances, such as faith, integrity, morality, love, and those things which are not testable by empirical methods, right? Which is what Dr. Jan was saying. Now, the question is, what do you do to test these things? You test them by going to the Bible, the biblical truth, biblical ethics, right? To determine truth. For instance, the lawyers amongst you will tell you that in a court, there are 6 criteria that you look at in order to judge whether somebody's explanation or somebody's evidence is trustworthy, is correct. The things I'll just run through them quickly, and then we could explain the last one. They must be simple and straightforward. Secondly, they must be consistent and reliable. 3, they must be reasonable, must be a reasonable explanation. 4, does the explanation fit with other evidences? 5, is it testable, can be tested? And 6, is the explanation fruitful? I like to deal with the last one and say it in the context of what we're discussing, which is Christianity, the belief in God. This is where it's important. You can't test it by empirical methods. So you have to use this law, legal strategy, and you find out, you test by those 6 criteria. And in the last one, which is the usefulness of belief in God, you say, is it useful? For instance, would someone with stress better if they believe in God and have somebody with a listening ear, who is the divine character, a listening ear to hear you? Their pain goes away by having a divine person listening to you. Does the belief in God modify your moral actions? For instance, if you realize that you're answerable to God, a divine being who created you, instead of answerable to a neighbor or a monkey, it definitely makes a difference in your moral actions. You have a moral obligation to serve God, the one who created you, if you believe that. Now, the third thing is that the belief in God must be meaningful. It must mean something. He must give you a peace of mind to run your life after that. So those things here can't be measured, as I said, by empirical methods and normal scientific methodologies. You have to go to the epistemology and the biblical ethics to get the meat of the situation in those cases. For things that are true to life, but not measurable, can't be evaluated by scientific methods.
I'm with you, Dr. Greenaway, but I'm wondering if I'm talking to an individual who does not believe that there's any credibility in the Bible. You and I are individuals who believe that God does exist. There are people out there who do not believe that there's credibility in the Bible, and I'm supposing that, or rather not supposing, but I'm proposing that it may be possible for us to take a scientific approach and show them from science itself that there is evidence of creation, there is evidence of intelligent design. So I totally agree from the perspectives that you have shared. But what I want to do this afternoon is to take science and look to see what is in science that testifies of this intelligent design in creation?
Okay. We can
Yes.
look to science. Oh, let me leave it to Dr. Greene. Go ahead. Give
Yes.
me the first bite of
There-
that cherry.
There are lots of things. We look at why, for instance, we go back to the SDRs, the seven rhythms. They were created by new physiology. The question is, when did new physiology start in the whole of our existence? Did it begin 6,000 years ago? And what we do, we want to relate what the Bible says to what we know in science.
Can I interrupt you a minute, Dr. Greenaway, to ask you to explain exactly what you mean by 7-day rhythms? I mean, you and I have spoken about this, but I want to make sure that the people who are listening follow us clearly.
For instance, baby, you will take blood from a baby and you measure, or you take the heart rate, for instance, and pulse and blood pressure. Those things have a rhythm of sevens in them. Lots of examples. There are lots of examples. Within the body, within each system, the workings of each system, the breathing, your breath, everything has a rhythm of sevens. For instance, okay, a good example, other examples. You want to have a baby. In the old days, they used to take the baby, or call it, circumcise a baby on the 8th day. Why on the 8th day? Because the clotting factors are maximal on the 7th day. It takes 7 days. Take music. The rhythm of sevens. Music is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Stop. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. And piano is a octave, is a rhythm of 5 octaves, 5 sevens. The colors of the rainbow is also in 7. The basic colors of the rainbow is in 7. If you look at all the structures, not only in science, in music, and even music, if they're finding out now recently that if you have Alzheimer's and so on, and depressive states, this happened to Saul in the Bible, depression states, music therapy can help you. And why music helps you? Because that rhythm of sevens in it is all connected to 7-day rhythms, 7 rhythms within the body and outside the body, and from one organism to another. It's all connected. It's like a telephone wire connecting this house to the 6 houses around here, and the telephone wire connecting each room in this house. It's the same thing. Can I just say one thing here that I wanted to say earlier, Pastor, that we talked about keeping this simple. The analogy here between evolution and creation is simply this. The banker, an astute banker, when he gets $100 note, he doesn't put it in his vault right away. He looks at it for a secret metallic thread, a common thread, which distinguishes a genuine $100 note from a non-genuine, from a counterfeit. If it's counterfeit, he calls janitor and says, put that in the waste paper bin. If it has the common thread in it, a metallic thread, he puts it in his vault. It's the same thing goes for creation. If you have the 7-day rhythm in it, all living things, every living thing has the 7-day rhythm. You ask yourself, why? Why did God do that? Because that is the common thread amongst everything. And if your explanation doesn't involve that 7-day rhythm, it's counterfeit.
Okay, now I know that. Oh, Dr. Daniel, you were going to add something. So
let me go. Your question was on the evidence of evolution. Let's just go back to Darwin and Darwin's turtle, the Galapagos turtle. The concept that here was a species that was changing over time. They were isolated and they were different from the species on the mainland. So those were changes. And the extrapolation of that is that if you take that process over millions of years, you will have one species becoming another species. But the data is only about a change in a species or change in a kind, as the Bible says, reproduce after its kind. Now, some people had interpreted that text of reproduction after its kind of something of a fixation of species, that there's no change. Everything should be as existed at the time of creation. But then when we look at dogs, there are hundreds of species of dogs, but they're still the dog kind. And some people have problems with that, that in their mind, everything should look exactly as they were coming from the Creator's hand. Everything that we see today, or for that matter, all men and women should look exactly like Adam and Eve. The fixation of the species. But that's not something that's taught in the Bible. So Darwin observed that yes, there are changes within the species. But then they've taken that which is often referred to as microevolution and saying that if you extend that over time, you can have macroevolution. So that an amoeba now develops into something different than an amoeba. But what Darwin observed, his turtles were still recognized as turtles. So that is an issue. There's the issue of microevolution, changes in the frequency, or scientists will tell you, frequency of the alleles. Because if you look at your blood group, you have A, B, and O. And so in one population, you may have a certain percentage of A, certain percentage of B, and certain percentage of O. That could change over time, but that's change within a species. That's what's referred to as microevolution, change in the frequency of the different alleles for, in this case, blood type. That changes over time. But to extend that to say that, okay, so the species is going to change from one to another is a major step to microevolution. So there, you can say there is evidence for frequency change in the alleles of particular types of genes. There's numerous examples of that, if you want to call it the evidence for microevolution. Obviously, the population of Antigua is not the same. If you're doing research in Antigua and you look at the genetic types in Antigua over the last 1,000 years, it would have changed. That's microevolution in the population. The population has changed. But you can't extrapolate that to macroevolution to say you have a different species of people living in Antigua.
You know, I want to go back to, in a minute, because I want to touch something that Dr. Greenaway is highlighting. But before I do that, let me just quickly, I'm aware that we don't have a lot of time here, but in terms of microevolution, you know, I know, for example, that, you know, if you use
by the definition of that term is just change in the frequency of the different alleles of a gene.
Yes, so that you can get resistant genes to certain things, you know. But let me, we would need a lot more time. Maybe you folks will have to come back for part 2 of this program, because there's some very important elements here. And I did want to touch on man this afternoon. And when I look up at the clock, so I'm going to jump to this question. I mean, God's creatures, there's so many things we can talk about, but I want to stick to man, and I'm speaking specifically now. Dr. Greenaway, I know you have done some research in this area, and our time is almost up. So I want to jump to this because, you know, you have studied the brain. The Bible says that man is fearfully and wonderfully made. what are some of the unique features of the human brain that testify of intelligent design? Dr. Greenaway, maybe you can respond. What are some of the
Yes.
unique features of the
Thank you,
human
sir. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. There's so many things. Firstly, I'd like to speak about the pineal gland, which is my hobby horse. Pineal gland is a small cone-shaped, that's why it's called pineal, in like a pine cone, in the middle of the brain. It is, it comes from tissues at the roof of the mouth. Okay, in embryology, in the baby, in the embryo, it migrates to where its current position now in the middle of the brain. Now, the specifics about this pineal gland, which is interesting, is that it has an abundance of aluminum, which is normally neurotoxic if it goes in the brain.
Let me just jump in just for one moment, Dr. Greenaway, to point out that the pineal gland was considered to be a vestigial organ of evolution.
Yes, I come into
But
that.
nobody talks about vestigial organs anymore.
This is why I talked about the real money, genuine money, and put the counterfeit to one side. We don't talk about the counterfeit because the counterfeit has same color, same size, same shape. There's no point discussing them. You discuss the real thing, which is the money. The thing is that the pineal gland has aluminum in it. Why aluminum? Because its aluminum is non-corrosive and has 98% reflectance. So it's like a mirror in like a mirror. So what happens is that
Dr. Greenaway, I missed that point. Could you say that again? It has 98% what?
98% reflectance. So it's
Okay.
like a mirror. Only 2% of the if you have light shining into a mirror, 2% is passing through. 98% is reflected.
Okay.
That's what pineal does. So it's better than a silver oxide mirror. In fact, it's high reflectance, but God has created that inside the pineal. Okay, why is it? Because we can go quickly now. Time's going. So just say quickly, why did you do that? He created that to be able to create a laser beam function inside the pineal. What happens? People get worried about laser. All laser is an acronym for light amplification by stimulation of emitted radiation. Okay, so if you have what you call active species photons bouncing from mirror to mirror, one mirror to another within the pineal, you get an acceleration of photons and you get built up into a beam called laser beam. Okay, that's basically what it is. Now, why did God do it? They did it for communication purposes. You know, microwave lasers, you can go to NASA or anywhere, you can get microwave lasers, and this is used for all sorts of things these days. In medicine, used in all sorts of things. Now, they microwave lasers, but all you need for a laser in the pineal is changing, going down the electromagnetic spectrum to the optical range of optical frequencies, optical wavelengths. And that's what God has done. Okay, now the main point is not to thump our chest and say we know God has built a laser beam and thing to control rhythms, to control SDIs, which control order, which control for instance order. For instance, your prophecies are bang on time because of these rhythms. Your promises, you ask God for promises. God promised Jesus came bang on time. And just by the way, Jesus is going to come again bang on time. So that's the big bang. Okay? Now, this pineal gland is a center for communication. Why communication? Because God is a God of love. And the visionary called Pastor Ty Gibson said, for love to exist and to flourish, there must be communication. That seems to be modus operandi for God, right? God is a God of love. From 1 John 4:8, he's intrinsically love. He cannot be anything but love. So if he's love, he must be able to communicate with his beings that he's created on earth. He's just not going to leave them down. He's caring God, he's a compassionate God. He's showing that he cares for us. That is how he physically cares for us. Now, so how does it help? It helps people who believe God, like Thomas in doubting Thomas in John 20, John chapter 20, 21. Thomas loved Jesus, but he would not believe that Jesus had been risen from the dead until he put his finger in his side and in his fingerprints. Now, what God is doing here is showing that by showing that the nitty-gritties of creation, we're putting our fingers in the side of Jesus Christ, the Creator. He's showing, he's leaning over backwards and saying, he's soon to come, he's soon to come. He's leaning over backwards and saying, this is me, folks. Stop looking for me in stained glass windows and tall, darkened, crusted walls and so on. Look at me in nature. So as we find out more about nature, the astrophysicists and so on, I find out more about nature. Jesus is telling us who he is and showing really who he is. And by showing us who he is, he's helping us to be able to reveal what Revelation 14, 6 and 7 says, to fear him, to love him, fear him, to honor him, and to worship him. He's giving us a reason why we should do that. And I just close by saying, he wants us to be able to discuss these issues, the new things that find up and forward in chronobiology. We haven't talked about the mathematical issues as well. Mathematics worked out, chronobiology linked with mathematics worked out the time of origins and so on. We talk about that another time, right? But if we have time, we talk about that. But the thing is that Jesus is wanting to say to the doubters, to the skeptics, this is me. I am the creator. And because I'm creator, I'm due to be worshipped. And there must be a discussion, a global discussion now about all these issues that we're talking about this afternoon. And well, he's telling you, pull up a virtual chair and let's talk.
Well, thank you so much. You certainly have a lot to say. Unfortunately, our time is up. It's a big topic. The Bible tells us, and I wanted to relate this to the issue of rhythms, because the Bible does say that God created the heavens and the earth. And we know as Christians, we talk about the sixth day creation, the seventh day being the day of rest. So we have that week, and Dr. Greene will mention this rhythm of sevens. But I suppose I can have you back both another time when we can continue and go deeper into some of these amazing elements of science and how they testify of the creative power of God. Our time really has expired. It's now after 4 o'clock, so we have to end. So I'm just going to ask for your closing thoughts. Let's start with Dr. Greenaway, make it real short, and then Dr. Daniel.
Well, I just like to say that the whole object of this exercise here is not to discuss what has been, not to discuss the false money, the false ideas. The problem is that we have been discussing false ideas. It makes no sense to do that. Let's discuss real money and what exactly God has. There's no doubt that God has created. We have to follow on that side. And if God is created, we must follow him and what he says.
Very well. Dr. Daniel, your closing thoughts.
Yes, the problems with evolution is that when we look at the complexity of nature, evolution cannot explain the complexities that we see in nature. I know when I was in graduate school, when I looked at the structure of the cell membrane, it was referred to as a bilipid protein sandwich. But the concept of just the cell membrane is lots of things happening. You have channel proteins, receptor proteins, transport proteins. It's a whole factory going in just at the level of the cell membrane. The complexity of nature cannot be explained simply by chance events, which is what evolution is. It cries out for a designer, for an intelligent designer. And secondly, even though we cannot carry out an experiment that will define God, we can carry out experiments that says, do people who are prayed for heal faster than people who are not prayed for? Or people who have a religious faith have a shorter recovery period than people who do not have a religious faith? Those experiments can be done and have been done and shows the benefit of a religious faith. And we can take that to the bank and to increase our faith, because through the scientific processes, we can do studies that will help to generate and to increase our faith.
You know, as we close, I remember my days in advanced level biology and looking, as you mentioned, the cell membrane, it just came back there to me. And the mechanics of the complexity of things that operate on the cellular level, one marvels, how could all of this happen randomly by chance? And perhaps one of these days we can have 1 hour to talk about this, you know, the amazing details, the complex machinery of things that take place there. You know, some people are now hearing about what is it now? The DNA and RNA and so on because of the COVID vaccine. But these are real complex issues that take place in the cell. And you know, when we talk about complexity on the cellular level, we're indeed saying this is not something that just happened overnight by chance. This has to be intentional design. And that's the concept. But our time is up. I want to thank you both for sharing. I will arrange with you for us to have a continuation of this meaningful discussion. To our viewers, we are grateful that you have joined us. I want to take the opportunity to say that in the month of November, we're going to be having a special series on religious liberty. We're going to be discussing with some of the folks on the Caribbean Religious Liberty Association. We will talk about various issues. Next week, we may not be on Let's Talk because the Inter-American Division is having its grand centennial celebration next week. But come November, we will be back and we are looking forward to seeing you. May God bless you until